Hello and welcome on Creative Society TV. I'm Alex and my co-host today is Marek. We will be talking today on the topic of modern slavery, and we have two very special guests with us today. Marek, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, sure. So let me introduce today Bonnie Tchorni. Bonnie is a founder of the mission J.A.D.E. And since 2018, they have been helping restoring freedom to boys and young men all over the world by building the first foundation in Guatemala. So welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you for having me.
Great. It's an honor to have you here. Our next dear guest is Phil Brewer. So Phil is a specialist advisor on human slavery at Human Trafficking Foundation and a former London police officer. Welcome, Phil.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. On our platform today, we would like to provide a field for discussion to go deeper into the topic and try finding the ways out of this phenomenon that we've got in our modern society.
Yes, and we both we had you both on the interviews on the platform, and both of you said that modern human slavery exists because it is a profitable business, right? And sadly, this is true. And why is it? Because in our consumer society, profit is king. Human life is not a value at all. And we may think that normal laws of the free economy theory will apply here as well, and that by lowering or eliminating the demand, we will destroy the suppliers. But are we living in a free economy? Aren't we being manipulated by constant and aggressive advertisement of everything? Isn't our demand artificially created? And I think that even if we boycott all the products where slave or child labor was used, we will not solve the problem, because we will not be solving the root cause of the problem itself. And for how long has this problem existed? How many years individuals and organizations have been voicing their concerns about it, fighting against it? But has it been at least partially solved? Let's take an example of coffee. If we all decided to stop drinking coffee, what would happen is that millions of people involved in this field will become unnecessary. Why I'm saying unnecessary? It's because maybe you've heard also Yuval Noah Harari talking about this during the World Economic Forum. He said that previously people of, for example, a conquered country could be used as slaves, but now people that are no longer employed, they would just become useless. And there are a lot of people like you who are dedicating their lives to improving the situation. But do you see that the importance of unification of everyone involved in this field, and not only everyone, to solve this problem once and for all? How do you see it? Bonnie, can you please start with you?
The unification of all to end child labor exploitation, I think it would drastically rely on the consumer. There will probably always be some form of a trafficker or an individual looking to exploit another human, an adult or a child, to have more profit gain from that item that they're trying to sell. But when it stops is when the consumerism takes those precaution measures to see where their products are being made and who is making their products, just as people do it for organic products. But when it stops with the consumer, then there will not be such a heavy demand for cheap items and cheap labor, and there will not be any money going towards that trafficker who is using children to exploit it. And I hope this is okay to say, but you can take the chocolate company who makes and they're number one of exploiting children for palm oil, and they're really profitable, and they're very successful, and they're cheap. You know, you can get the for like $1, and there's a reason for that. So whenever the consumerism slows down, then we'll be able to actually approach reducing child labor on a more drastic scale of millions to millions instead of a couple tens here to thousands here.
Mm-hmm. Can I also ask here, because where Alexei, I think, was heading is that under normal circumstances, when, let's say, there's equal demand and offer, right, this would work. But do you think we can see, for example, the advertisement for other products, from each corner all day long on TV and everywhere? Do you think this is? Do you think that this has got any impact on lowering the consumption of these products?
Like advertisement awareness?
Yeah.
I think so. I would like to hope so. You know, it changed me from purchasing it before I even started working with trafficked children. Before then, I was working with only sex trafficked women. And when I learned about the unethical purchases I was making from coffee, from like just name brands, basic staple pieces that were in my life, I stopped purchasing it. But it did take that person raising awareness for me to know what was happening. So I think it is possible, not for everybody, because not everybody has resources to pay more, but I think it would help a lot of people who are in the dark about what child labor is and what child labor trafficking is.
Mm-hmm. And Phil, do you agree with this, that, let's say, rising awareness can eliminate human trafficking and misuse of child labor?
I think there's certain sections of society that will listen to information about exploitation. I think, unfortunately, there's also elements of society that are consciously ignorant in terms of recognising that exploitation may happen, whether it's where they get their nails done or where they get their car washed, but actually because they're getting a good price and, you know, it's cheap, that actually will sort of almost put to the back of their minds the fact that behind that may be some sort of level of exploitation. And I think that's the real challenge. You know, we have these conversations and there are people that will change their lifestyles. You know, Bonnie's explained when she found out about exploitation, she boycotted certain companies or changed her certain part of her lifestyle. And everyone has the power and the ability to do that. But there will always be some people that will put a good deal over the suffering of individuals that lie behind those cheap products. And that can be a real challenge, you know, no matter how much education or awareness that we involve ourselves in, and you know, it's really down to that peer pressure and actually looking at how we remove that exploitation from supply chains to actually really make a difference. Unfortunately, it's also the hardest part of actually eliminating exploitation is being proactive in removing that as well.
Thank you, Phil. I like this term also during our previous interview, the conscious ignorance. And I can see where Bonnie comes from, because she herself was already sensibilized to this problem, right? And this is why like this resonated with you, and you were willing and you made these changes in your consumption practices. But for most of the people, they are not even aware of these things. And even if you tell them, it is so far away for them that they're not really concerned. You know, they just want their normal cup of joe, and they don't really think about it. Or they may be presented, this is a very new, and you know, we have these things. I don't know if you also have this in the States, but in Europe, we have this equitable trade labels and stuff like that. And we all know that labels, they are misleading. These are just labels. How do you even identify these things? Like they can say, oh, you can trace everything, like every grain of coffee, because we are taking this example, to the production single origin production farm somewhere, I don't know, in Peru, for example. But isn't it just some sort of, like a relief, but for someone? Is there any way to confirm this? Or because, I think that the main idea, it would be easier to ask everyone, and we did this for more than 10 years, like what is the most precious thing? And this is human life for every one of us. But we are not talking about it, at least we are not talking about these values openly. We do not talk about like what is the world that we would like to live in. But we've started doing this 10 years ago, and now you see it's growing, and a lot of people are already joining like you. And we talk about these fundamental issues in our society. And we are coming to this conclusion that, once we change the value system, this that when we put human life as the highest value in our society, and this is that like not 99%, but 99.99% will understand and will support, because no one wants to die, right? So if we put this and we adopt all other decisions looking through this lens, of will this hurt at least one person, one life? So we are not doing it. We can find other ways, because right now, we are being, and this is the question of propaganda, right? It's the same everywhere. We are being told, oh guys, we are polluting the planet, so we need to cut down fossil fuels. And we can only choose between two evils, which are solar and wind, which are inconsistent and cannot, and they are only 3% of the energy that's being supplied right now. And we are looking at the like winter with with fear, because there's not enough energy. So we are being led, I would say, in these media wars to some sort of conclusions, decisions, but we can look in a totally different way and say, look, guys, we would like to put human life as the highest value. And if we look through every decision, can we feed people food that will make them unhealthy and ultimately lead to death, premature death? Well, no. Well, can we make then T-shirts that contain, lead in the fabric, and that lead to also increased sickness and mortality? Well, no, because and you see, what do you think about these values? If we instill these values, and we, in schools, for example, we tell about things that support human life and not who killed whom and when, as what we're being told, what do you think? If we put human life as the highest value, will this solve the problem?
Yes. So if we had a unified approach to sort of morals and life, etc., then absolutely that could work. The challenges are, we are talking about people. We are talking about the complexity of communities, of regions, of countries. And that's where it begins to get really difficult. There are very few straightforward yes, no sort of fix, not fix answers within the world of modern slavery and human trafficking. And one thing just that sort of sprung to mind when you opened, Alexei, it's in some ways, some of the struggles, as an example, we know that people are exploited. So it may be in a factory somewhere in maybe in India, where people are earning a few rupees an hour, and we know that is exploitative practice. But the fact is that those few rupees that individual earns every hour makes a difference to their lives. So if we look at this and we decide, well, this factory is using exploitative practices, let's close it down and save these poor people from being further exploited. The knock-on effect is they go from having very little to absolutely nothing. And that is, in some ways, the real challenge. This is such a complex issue, and unless we have a unified approach to look at sort of the people's wealth and that everyone's put onto a level playing field, there will always be that hierarchical exploitative situation through society, across the world, and that's the real challenge.
Honestly, in my opinion, at least from my experience working with such diverse different communities down in Guatemala and slowly breaching our way into helping, different survivors in different parts of the world of human trafficking, but different forms of human trafficking, is that every success story that we've had has been customizable to the community that we're working in. So for the children in Zone 3, the city dump, most of them are children of recyclers and work on dump trucks. So we focus on that type of employment and business building, because you can't stop landfills, and you can't break down the walls of the city landfill, but you can teach them skills where they can have a job of a skill that they already have to make ethical income and move along with their lives. And then same with the indigenous community, none of them are recyclers. All of them are agriculture workers or weavers, or they're striving to be like a school teacher. So we take the community, no matter how small the town is. I should even say we take the child that we're working with and figure out their strengths and their weaknesses and try and build them up a life where they are no longer vulnerable to labor trafficking or whatever form of human trafficking we're trying to help them from. So as human trafficking eradication should be on a global scale, ideally, but in reality, you have to take that victim, that individual, and give them a life where they're no longer vulnerable. So it's more like a domino effect, because when you help one child, they're strong enough now to help their peers or to at least educate maybe their parents. And it's kind of like a trickle down effect. So we work much more intimately, and that way we don't have to go back and clean up a mess, because if you don't take that time to strengthen the individual fully, their vulnerability could be even greater. Because if they're already at risk and they already have seldom resources, and instead of providing all the resources they need to survive, you're giving them the training skills to get their own resources to survive, it's just more beneficial for them in the long run. And those are life skills that nobody can take away. No matter if all the documents were taken away, those life skills and those trainings could never be taken away from them. And that's, I think, how you really strengthen a town and a civilization to not become vulnerable to traffickers.
So instead of giving them fish, you teach them how to fish, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
And I also wanted to ask you, because I liked the example you've been using with avocado in our previous interview, so what's your experience if, for example, all the people stopped buying this avocado from this farm where children need to work? Don't you think that, for example, this avocado would start to be grown at another location where they would also use it instead? So what's your view on this? It just reminds me, you have a bag with water and you are pushing it together, so the water basically starts to sprinkle in between your fingers. So this is also the idea where we are heading, that we can eliminate maybe one location or two locations, but the question on a broader scale is if in this way we are eliminating the problem, if we are eliminating the root cause of the problem. So what do you think about this?
Well, I guess the first question you should ask is, why are there children even picking avocados? And the answer is for money. So if you look at more of the root reason of why the child is working in this field versus what the item is from this field, I think it's more important to prioritize the needs of the child than the consumer getting the avocado. Because I think avocado production is possible, to have year round, just as you can get coffee year round in Guatemala and broccoli. But whenever you figure out the reasons that they're putting children on the farms, and there's a huge reason for that, and it's because the families have no money. It's because they work to get $2 a day, the father of the household, and there's like 10 children. Or maybe it's because there's no education, just zero schools. So naturally, what is a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old going to do? They should be put to work, and they are put to work. And that is more of the problem than it is of an individual going to a grocery store and picking an avocado of a mass production that was picked from the hands of a child. Because if there's zero opportunities, but a huge need for the child to work, then we have to supplement that fill. So if the child needs education, we should build more schools. If the child needs money, we should have ethical ways of teaching them trade skills, or at least a mentorship program where they can work ethically and not be victimized to working without getting paid.
So did you want to say that if they had education, there are other opportunities for the children to start working and to earn money than this?
100%. And that is actually what our organization primarily focuses on. We don't just take children out of a bad situation of exploitation and we're like, okay, go back to your house, you're good to go. They need money. The root of the problem is still there. There's no education, there's no money. So we started building a school. We started building trade skills where if they don't have the resources to finish middle school or finish high school, at the least they can do a few weeks of a program or learn English. And now we can show them international companies where they can work. And it has been proven to work. People who learn English and only went to elementary school now work for Amazon in Guatemala, or they work at a call center and make double the amount of what everybody around them is making. So if you educate a child, you have just given them a way to make sustainable money without any risk of vulnerability. So we do prioritize children's education or trade skills, but not every child can go to school for 6 years and complete middle school. That is a very high luxury in Guatemala. If what was it? I think it was like 5% of the country finishes high school, and most of them are only finishing 3rd grade or 4th grade. So the majority of the country is uneducated. So when you teach them how to read, how to write, how to make their own money and do something different than what their community already does, like agriculture or recycling, the world of opportunity opens the doors for them, and they no longer have to live off $2 a day.
Oh, education is definitely key, and it should be available to everyone. But how about this radical idea that kids should not work, they should just study? And I guess that we as a society, especially today, we can provide great education for everyone. And, we are coming back to this idea, because what you are saying is totally valid in this current world that we are living in today. And if we look at the possibilities of transforming it so that kids don't have to work, because they're kids. Of course, education is great, and it's great that once they're educated, they can work for international companies and earn much more, several times more. But it's still kids who are working. And I think that as a society today, we are spending billions and a lot of billions, 635 billions per year on fighting the CO2 problem. Do you think this will be enough to give these kids a great life, or we are spending trillions on going to other planets that are already dead? Why not look in this direction that we as a society are mismanaging even the wealth that we are having today, and this wealth is being built more and more by kids like you are helping, the ones that you are helping, because when they work for Amazon, it's great, but this guy is the richest guy in the world, right? Jeff Bezos. Why is he the richest guy in the world? Because he has kids working for several bucks an hour, and he can margin the things that he is selling to everyone else, like thousands percent, several thousands of percent. Phil, do you think that we can implement these things like the value of human life, the value like free education and stuff like that in the political systems of our countries? Because this is where it all starts, because we will not be able also to exploit kids in other countries when we have this written in our own constitution. Can we do this?
We can, Alexei, but I think it's actually changing the whole mindset about how we approach it, and really building on what Bonnie has already set out. One of the key elements to this is about removing that vulnerability to exploitation from someone's life, and that's drilling down and actually spending time to make sure that key element, or those key elements that make someone susceptible to exploitation, are removed and don't return. And unfortunately, we quite often go down the quick fix route. So, and that is quite often a criminal justice route in terms of prosecuting traffickers, putting them in prison for a specific amount of time. But what we don't do is address the vulnerability that is still wrapped around that victim of exploitation. And as Bonnie described, education is one way out. Giving people access to actually taking some control of their lives is another way of removing that exploitation. These are not easy things to do, but as Bonnie said, they are things that can be that can sort of they're projects that need to be very much focused locally, because each individual will have a specific type of enabler to exploitation, within that vulnerable community. So it has to have that approach. So it can be done on a global scale, but it can't be done in the way that we're approaching it already. We can't keep sending millions upon millions of pounds to countries that we see as sort of source countries if actually we've got no control over what happens to those millions of pounds, and do they actually reach the people that are being exploited to help remove those enablers to exploitation. And so this is where the whole system can be a real challenge in terms of addressing those issues. And in some ways, where there is an added layer of complexity is that many people live in normalised, exploitative sort of lifestyles through no fault of their own, but that is just the way it has played out. So actually for sort of me from the UK, from a privileged background, approaching someone and saying, oh, you're being exploited, it's terrible, the likelihood is they're just going to look at me and go, can you please just leave me alone? I'm quite happy with with my life, because they know no different. So, it's multi-pronged in terms of that approach, but I don't think sort of a criminal justice route or looking at sort of targeting exploiters is always the way. It's that example that Bonnie has described in terms of the projects that she's been involved in, and actually drilling down and looking at how can we long term remove those enablers to exploitation so that someone doesn't find themselves constantly being exploited based on the fact that they're destitute, the community that they're back from, the actual sort of ethnicity in terms of their ethnic group, because they are the people that have traditionally been targeted. So it is a real challenge. It is possible, but it really does. It just needs a whole sort of change in mindset and approach.
Can I also ask, how far back are we tracking these activities in history?
Well, I think it's. I think it's a really good sort of point to raise, actually, because we've almost segregated what happened in sort of the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries in terms of slavery and sort of actually that overpaying for individuals to set them to work for next to nothing, and what we now describe as human trafficking or modern slavery, because the elements are still the same. It's still that control and coercion. It's the fact is that we're far more covert about how it happens now than we were. But this is, this has happened for centuries. If you go back through history, there will be exploited sort of communities, individuals throughout life who have found themselves in positions where they've been removed from their country, moved from their region, or exploited by people, more affluent people who are in far more control in terms of running countries, far more privileged positions. So it's, when you strip everything away, the elements are still the same. It's just the approach has changed. And even when we look at what we describe as modern slavery and human trafficking, as we approach or we target one element of exploitation, our exploiters are very, very quick and adept at changing their processes to avoid detection or to ensure that actually exploitation can continue without sort of the focus of law enforcement or society in general when they're pointing the finger and questioning whether what's happening is ethical or not.
And also an additional question, do you see any improvement in the last years, let's say, in terms of drastically lowering the number of exploited people?
I smile. I only smile because it's one of those questions. I would say, from my own experience, if you asked me 10 years ago what human trafficking was, I would not have had a clue. Absolutely not had a clue. From a UK perspective, we had a number of laws that dealt with human trafficking, modern slavery offences, but that attracted very minimal sentences or were wrapped up within immigration legislation as well. And certainly from a UK perspective, over the last 8-9 years, there's certainly been a greater focus. I think if you stop someone in the street now, a member of the public, and ask them what they thought human trafficking or modern slavery was, but they would probably be able to give you some idea of what it means to them. Where I would say 8-9 years ago, people would just look at you blankly and not have a clue. So I think awareness has changed. One of the real challenges is because it is a hidden crime, when it comes to statistics and measuring whether or not the situation has improved or not, I think it's really difficult to measure. I think, it's very much driven by economies, and it goes back to what we were talking about before. When you look at what is modern slavery and human trafficking, what are the drivers, it is purely sort of from a financial, it's a money-making business, whether it is saving money through exploiting someone or making money through exploiting someone. So, whether it's decreasing or increasing, it's really difficult to measure because awareness has improved. So we are seeing more cases reported. So I know that's a bit of a cop-out in terms of your question, in terms of not answering it directly, but I think it is a real challenge because we just do not know the data or the statistics beyond any question that lie behind modern slavery and human trafficking.
Yeah, why have I been asking these two questions? It is just because, as in history, until today, we are delegating our power to a small group of people who defend their own interest in every country. It doesn't matter if it's Western countries, Eastern countries, it's everywhere the same. And we can see that, the scissors go away, richer getting richer, rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. And there are billions of people who literally fight for their life, And do you think that without making the change of the system, do you think we can do something with it effectively?
Bonnie, did you want to go first? Because I'm conscious I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're fine. You're brilliant. I think it will still be an individual's choice to help such an intense crime. I would love to put my hopes in the country's government to take on their own personal problems with human trafficking, but it just doesn't happen. And even if the identification of victims does increase, the shelters and the refugees and the programs that are actually in place to handle situations of human trafficking are usually very segregated. Like, if you are a shelter that helps LGBTQ community, maybe you only help youth, maybe you only help adults. If you're a shelter that only helps women, you probably don't help girls. So even the places that are already existing are not capable to take in all the types of victims that exist. And one thing that I noticed is that a lot of places that are helping victims can't take in immigrants, even if they have been trafficked. So now you have only trafficked victims that are local and citizens, which is a pretty small number when you look at the mass scale. So I think it will probably always be on the shoulders of a humanitarian or an international worker, or a religious group. I guess you could throw those in the group too, but somebody who has a passion for it, where they can take on such a problem. Because I think if the country's governments wanted to actually help this type of crime, because they benefit from cheap labor too, you know, their economy gets boosted when they don't have to pay their legal workers a living wage. So I don't know whose shoulders it will fall on to eradicate this type of crime, but I definitely have my hopes for the humanitarian workers to provide the most and the best resources for victims of human trafficking.
And I'd very much support wholeheartedly what Bonnie says, and I think from a government perspective, and again I apologise, I'm being quite centred around the UK, but with the introduction of the Modern Slavery Act, which was seen as groundbreaking in 2015, there was a real drive in terms of ensuring that the different facets of law enforcement, civil society, academia, local government all work together for a common purpose of supporting victims, identifying suspects, and ensuring that that modern slavery was eradicated. But as we know, governments change, focus changes. This is expensive, looking after vulnerable people, giving them sort of a sense of worth, ensuring that actually they can recuperate and move on without the risk of exploitation is expensive business. And as a result of that, what actually seemed quite attractive at the time when you're looking for votes, and there's a reason behind that from a government perspective, all of a sudden quite quickly changes to become less attractive, because there's other things that the government want to focus on, but actually caring for modern slavery victims with a narrative that that one size doesn't fit all, which means that actually sometimes the finger's pointed about an abuse of a system as well. It quite quickly results in a change of government approach to whether or not they are fully signed up to tackling human trafficking and modern slavery.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Also when we were preparing, we had this analogy that came up, that when there are many individual agents, let's say, who are working on these problems, and as you said, like for the government, they have a lot to do, right? So they are trying to fix this thing, then there is this thing that falls apart, and also in our world today, like everything is connected. You pull the string from one side of the globe and something else falls apart. This is our example, that if we stop using, for example, like certain types of products, then there are people losing their livelihoods on the other side of the planet. And we had this analogy that came up, when you have this panel house kit, that you need to assemble. And you cannot do it one by one, right? You need to do it all in once. And you need to have all the people, like all the village should come in and pick the panels and put them straight up, and then the house stands, and this is why we need this holistic approach at the planetary level. And this will solve many problems, if not all of the problems, if we, understand that the problem is not human trafficking or people who use child like products used with made with child labor. But the problem is the format of society where we allowed this to happen, right? It is because we were told that this is the way we live, this is how the things should be. But everything that surrounds us is made by us, people, everything. It's not the government that that made your computer or mine. It is people like you and I, we are those who are doing these tables, chairs and stuff. So we know how to do things. It's just that we are doing them right now for someone to become richer. But we can also decide that everyone can become richer as a society. We can become this wonderful society where people will care about each other. And this starts with the value of human life. And this is what we've been talking about. So this is why trying to fix, the problems one by one, or maybe in complex, but still not everything. We will be still living in this format where we value profits over human life. So this is where we all what we are trying to say everywhere, that we need to change the format to from consumer to creative format of society, creative. Not that we will all be singing and drawing pictures, but creative and constructive society, the one that we are building a better future for everyone. And this starts with having these talks as we are having today, acknowledging the problems that we have, and understanding that just trying to fix these things or that things will not be possible before we understand that this is the format. The format should go. We don't have to break anything. It's not about making a revolution, it's about making an evolution, this evolutionary step of understanding, acknowledging that we had our problems in the past and moving forward. So what you would like to see in this world, let's say this world that where we are solving these problems and we are going forward, what would you like to see in this world? Bonnie, we can start with you.
I would like to see more people ready to reduce their consumerism on products and be more willing to donate to humanitarian aid. So I noticed a lot of people are reluctant to donate $5 to a nonprofit, but they will gladly spend $15 on a cake pop and a coffee, or spend $30 out on a meal or a new shirt instead of sponsoring a child for $35. And I think that is just the fear of missing out, somebody fearing that they will not have that money for something that they want inside of their heart, versus seeing the value of giving it to somebody who doesn't have anything. So if I had to improve people's financial decisions, I would choose it that way, because I think a lot of hardworking individuals are pulling the weight of nonprofits, and I am one of them. I will gladly donate $200 out of my own bank account every month to sponsor some of our children, and I will do all the labor. I will do everything. It is a joy to me to do that, but I would just love to see some more adults who are willing to, sacrifice that $10 or that extra, $100 here and there throughout the year just to help some other people in need and still feel satisfied. I don't want them to do it out of guilt or, feeling so horrible for another child. I want them to do it because they have a heart for and a compassion for other people who don't have as much as them. And so that sacrifice feels good. And I would love to see that. It makes me excited thinking about it. I love when people are willing to do that. They're like the light of the earth,
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I'm glad Bonnie went first on that one, because I will follow the theme, and I totally agree. I think in some ways it's very easy when you don't have that direct contact with someone who is in an exploitative situation. It's very easy to put it at the back of your mind and think that actually it doesn't impact on me. It's not an issue for me. But it's actually, all around you, if you look, you will see that there are people in exploitative situations. And even if you do no more than just show some interest, have a chat with someone, even if it's someone who's sort of like just 5 minutes of having a chat with someone that's sort of sat on their sleeping bag under a railway arch, and just having that conversation, understanding the person behind them, it builds in that understanding of humanity. It actually impacts to people, not people that you don't know, that people that you speak to, just people like you and I, and it's almost it's reinvigorating that humanity and humility, and the reason I say that's so important from a law enforcement point of view, and what we class as professionals, so people working for local government who have responsibility for looking after children, etc., they are under significant pressure. And the thing that gets stripped out time and time again is that humility and that humanity in terms of how you interact with someone. And actually that can make all the difference, because it's about building trust. It's listening to someone. It's recognising how you personally can make a difference, no matter how small. You're not 100% reliant on governments to take the lead in terms of tackling this as an issue. There are things that you can change within your own life, whether it is from consumer, if it's just being more aware of the community around you, and actually just investing, if you can't invest money, investing a bit of time into listening to someone and thinking about how you can help them, going back to what I said before about removing those enablers to exploitation. And I think, it demonstrates that you can make changes that can have a real significant impact on other people's lives that might not necessarily cost you a fortune. It might just require you to change the way you live your life. It's things that are more than capable in terms of doing that will make a difference.
Thank you. And one point that we haven't mentioned today is the unity. And this is very important. It's like, you have got this brown movement where everything is moving on its own in its direction, and at the end effect, as a mass is moving nowhere, is staying at one point. Whereas if the entire mass would unite and would, as we call it, pull in one direction, then the whole mass of people can move somewhere. And this is the idea behind Creative Society, is to provide a platform for uniting people with these wonderful activities that Bonnie does, which come from heart and can be felt. This is just wonderful what you do, with all of this knowledge that you feel, for example, bring. There are, I don't want to overrun, but there are millions of people, doing this, of which you might not know. And imagine that million of people with this aim come together and start acting. This is a force that can move the earth forward, right? And so this is something which is, I think, very important. And this is why we are doing all of this, providing the platform for uniting, letting, as Phil said, people chat, etc. Right? And so, what we would also appreciate is if you shared this idea, because only together, because we are separated to countries, to religions, to social statuses, to anything. But in fact, we are all people, and we will just want to be happy. We just want to live happy, and we can really do it if we unite. If we unite everyone in his position, in his place, with his knowledge. If we unite, we can really make this change. So I'm really grateful that we have had this wonderful conversation today. And maybe if you would like to say something to the end to our viewers, we would much appreciate it.
Well, to all the viewers, don't doubt yourself. You can be the change. I told myself I was going to change the world of what labor trafficking looks like. I was going to help victims and find the most unserviced population, and I managed to do it. I work with slums, indigenous communities, boys and minors, and immigrants. So I believed in myself and I can do it, and you should believe in yourself and you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just from our conversation, you understand, I think everyone will understand how complex an issue this is. And there are so many different factors that result in someone being exploited or finding themselves in an exploitative situation. But my message is really, again, stealing almost from Bonnie yet again, it is, that there are small things that you can do as an individual that will have a knock-on effect. If everyone does just a small thing, that can result in great change. And we all have the power to do that, no matter what our position or status is in the world. We have that power just by making small tweaks to our lives, just showing some interest, providing yourself with better understanding. You can absolutely make a difference.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And so it all boils down to start with yourself and be the change you want to see. So this is a great piece of advice. And if everyone does it, we will change the world, because we are all, the society is made from each and every one of us, from individuals, and together we can make this change happen. Thanks again for being with us and for sharing your understandings, your knowledge. It was really a great pleasure seeing you again, and I hope to see you back again.